Stephen Curry is arguably the most influential basketball player of this generation, with only LeBron rivaling the kind of cultural icon that Steph has become since entering the NBA 14 years ago. But long before Steph was shocking the NBA with multiple MVPs and NBA Finals rings, he was just a scrawny, overlooked 20-year-old playing at a tiny, insignificant university in North Carolina, Davidson College. Everyone loves an underdog story, and even more so every year in the month of March. So today in this video, we are going to relive one of the greatest underdog stories of all time, Stephen Curry and the magical run of the 2008 Davidson Wildcats. But before we get to that special season, we first must show you how we even got here. Although Steph was the son of former NBA player and sharpshooter Del Curry, who had a fantastic NBA career of his own, he wasn't recruited much at all out of high school. Standing at 6'2" and a very light 165 pounds, Steph received only a couple offers out of high school from smaller schools like William & Mary and High Point. His dad's alma mater and school of choice, Virginia Tech, wouldn't offer him more than a preferred walk-on position, which Steph turned down rather quickly. Instead, he chose Davidson, which was only 30 minutes away from his native Charlotte and had a small enrollment of 1,700 students. In order to understand just how important the 2008 season was to Steph and his teammates, we must go back to the 2007 NCAA tournament. Davidson is playing 4-seeded Maryland in the first round, and with 17:30 left to go in the contest, Davidson is winning 52-44. The rest of the half, they would only score 18 points, and they would slowly see their lead dwindle, losing 82-70. This team was convinced they were good enough to win in March, but had come just short on top of a 30-point effort from Steph as a freshman. And as disappointing of a loss this was for Davidson, a school that hadn't won an NCAA tournament game since 1969, there was still plenty to be excited about. They were returning literally everybody that played any meaningful minutes. Plus, after a summer well spent with Team USA winning silver at the Under-19 FIBA World Championships, it was reported that star freshman guard Stephen Curry had hit a growth spurt over the summer. Remember how I said that Steph was 6'2", 165 coming into his freshman season at Davidson? Well, after doing more research throughout this video, it looks like that wasn't true at all. According to an article written by Blue Ridge Now, Steph was only 5'11" when he first signed with Davidson. And by the time his freshman season began, he had sprouted up to 6'1". Now heading into his sophomore season, he was recently measuring at 6'3". This is the story of Stephen Curry and the 2008 Davidson Wildcats. The Wildcats were led by a legend in Davidson lore, Bob McIlhop. He had been coaching for Davidson since 1989. Coach Bob only ran his team 8 deep this season, and that started with a trio of 6'8" forwards, Thomas Sander, Boris Mino, and Andrew Lovedale. 3 other role players in Bryant Barr, Will Archambault, and Max Paulhouse-Goslin. But if there was a Robin to Steph Curry's Batman this season, it was senior point guard Jason Richards. And as fun as this season was for this team, it didn't start out that way at all. After a blowout win versus Division III school Emory to start the season, the Davidson Wildcats would have a schedule unlike any other mid-major in the country. Their second game of the season versus number 1 North Carolina, a team that consisted of 4 NBA players in Wayne Ellington, Danny Green, Ty Lawson, and the 2008 unanimous Player of the Year, Tyler Hansbrough. Yet somehow, someway, in front of all of America on ESPN, the Davidson Wildcats found themselves up 59-56 and would only be down 1 point, 66-65 with 1:21 left. Wayne Ellington hits a cold-blooded mid-range jumper, putting UNC up 3, but Davidson's offense couldn't do enough down the stretch, losing 72-67. And even though this was a tough loss, it was also a precursor to how good this team could truly be. But this was just the beginning of Davidson's incredibly tough non-conference schedule to start the season. And although they were competitive in every single game, they were sitting with a record of 4-6 6 after a loss at NC State 66-65. Those 6 losses came against high-quality opponents, including number 1 overall North Carolina, a 79-73 loss to a top 10 ranked Duke team, and a UCLA team that was ranked 7th in the country in a game where Davidson was winning 34-30 at halftime. And yes, this is the UCLA team that had Russell Westbrook, Darren Collison, and Kevin Love. After the season, point guard Jason Richards was asked about this hard non-conference schedule, and he had this to say about it. Coach asked us if we wanted to play a tough schedule. We knew we had the team coming back. If we wanted to be the best, we had to play against the best. I remember when we were sitting there, I think we were 4-6 at the time, thinking to ourselves, we can't let this get us down. It's only going to prepare us for what we wanted to do in March. That's what kind of the whole season was, a build up to March. And Jason Richards was exactly right. The 2008 Davidson Wildcats wouldn't lose another game the rest of the regular season, with only 3 of those remaining games being within single digits. As great as a regular season run this was for Davidson, it was all eyes now on the Southern Conference Tournament Championship, in which they were entering as the number 1 seed. And they did exactly what they set out to do, defeating Wofford in the first round 82-49, UNC Greensboro in the semifinals 82-52, and Elon in the championship 65-49, all wins above double digits and officially punching their ticket to the big dance for the 2nd year in a row. As much as it hurt to be leading against Maryland late in that game last year and bowing out in the first round, they were simply a better team this year with potentially the best player on the floor in almost any game they would play. And the selection committee understood this, giving them a 10 seed, which is pretty high for a mid-major, and matching them up in the first round versus 7-seeded Gonzaga. Those who really paid attention would know this Davidson team had the chance to make a run. They know who Stephen Curry was, but that wasn't really the case for the majority of America. Who's watching North Carolina take on Davidson in November? Who's watching Davidson take on Duke in early December? Although Steph Curry had shown what he was capable of, this was his time to put on a show in front of all of America. The first half did not go the way the Davidson Wildcats had planned. They were down by 11 with 8 minutes to go and finished down 41-36. After a pair of Steph Curry threes to cut the lead to 2 to start the half, Gonzaga would again extend their lead to 11 points. But on the shoulders of Steph Curry, Davidson would crawl back into this game, even leading 74-72 with a minute 56 to go. After Gonzaga's Jeremy Pargo drove to the lane and scored, tying the game at 74, and a huge offensive rebound from Andrew Lovedale, he would kick it out to Steph Curry for one of the greatest shots of his career to date, a 3-pointer putting Davidson up 77-74 with only a minute to go. And that would be all Davidson would need. They'd win the game 82-76 and officially began their Cinderella run of the 2008 NCAA tournament. Stephen Curry was marvelous, but especially in the second half. He had 40 points total, 30 in the second half. I remember watching this game as a 12-year-old with my brothers, asking ourselves, who is this Stephen Curry dude? Everyone was calling him Steven at the time, and it was just insane to see him hit 3 after 3 after 3. It's safe to say that after watching this game, all of America would be cheering them on against an absolute powerhouse in number 2 seeded Georgetown, led by 7'2" senior center Roy Hibbert. The first half was a rough shooting half for Davidson, and Stephen Curry himself only scoring 5 points, shooting as a team 28% from the field and down 11. 2.5 minutes into the second half, and Georgetown was up 46-29 after a pair of threes. Senior point guard Jason Richards seemed to be the only player keeping the Wildcats in the game, as he had 14 of the team's 29 points up until this point. But luckily for all of us, the shots finally started falling for Davidson. And it all started with this immaculate 4-point play from Steph Curry. But the lead was still double digits until star center Roy Hibbert picked up his 4th personal foul, sending him straight to the bench. Another Steph 3 and then an assist to Andrew Lovedale cuts the lead to 2. But Georgetown would hold serve until the 5-minute mark, when Davidson would finally take the lead 60-59 off a backdoor cut and one from none other than Steph Curry. After a cold shooting night for a majority of the game, Steph Curry had turned it on. Check out this 3-pointer to put Davidson up 5. Georgetown would cut the lead to 2 points, 67-65 with 25 seconds left, but Steph Curry would hit 5 of 6 free throws down the stretch. Davidson would move on to the Sweet 16 with a score of 74-70. Through 2 games in the NCAA tournament, Stephen Curry had 40 and 30, averaging 35 a game, with 30 and 25 of those points coming in the second half of each game respectively. As with any double-digit seed in March, it's one thing to win one game, it's a whole nother thing to make the Sweet 16, and now that Davidson had done just that, they were starting to garner serious national attention. They were the darlings of the 2008 NCAA tournament at this point, but the Sweet 16 would provide even a bigger stage for Stephen Curry and the 2008 Davidson Wildcats. They'd face off against 3-seeded Wisconsin at Ford Field, home of the Detroit Lions, in front of a sold-out crowd of 57,028 people, and one very special guest sitting courtside, LeBron James. At halftime, it was knotted up 36-36. Could Davidson continue this Cinderella run with another strong second half? Only 20 minutes of game time stood between us and the answer to that question. By the 9-minute mark in the second half, Davidson was up by 17 points, and this game was officially over. The Wildcats go on to demolish 3-seeded Wisconsin 73-56. Here's 3 plays from Steph Curry, 2 of them being very difficult threes that extended the lead. And then this sick and one that had the whole stadium roaring, including LeBron. Steph would finish again with 33 points, and this 2008 Davidson team had advanced to the Elite Eight. There was only one thing standing in the way of Stephen Curry reaching the Final Four and becoming only the 3rd double-digit seed at this point in history to ever do so, after LSU in 1986 and George Mason just 2 years earlier in 2006. That one last thing was Goliath, aka the #1 seeded Kansas Jayhawks, a team with 8 ESPN top 50 recruits, led by future NBA players Darrell Arthur, Brandon Rush, and Mario Chalmers. The Jayhawks had been rolling through their region of March Madness up until this point, including a 19-point win over 8-seeded UNLV and a 15-point win over 12-seeded Villanova in the Sweet 16. Steph had a couple really nice plays in this first half, including this 3 and this left-handed finish. At the end of the first half, Kansas was up 30-28 in a tightly contested, heavily defensive game. Kansas's defensive game plan on Curry was most impressive in this tournament, rotating 4 guards consistently on him, keeping them fresh and keeping him bogged down. Down 59-54 with 56 seconds left on the clock, Davidson was lucky enough to miss a free throw, but the ball went out on Kansas, so they'd get possession. On the ensuing inbounds pass, Stephen Curry would hit a 3, making it a 2-point game with 54 seconds to go. Kansas point guard Sharon Collins then narrowly misses a 3 as a shot clock is expiring, and Davidson would have the ball with 16 seconds to go and one chance to either tie and send this game to overtime or hit a 3 and send themselves to the Final Four. As fate would have it, it wasn't Steph that was taking the final shot. Kansas switched and double-teamed multiple ball screens to the point with only a couple seconds left. Steph shoveled it to Jason Richards, who took about a 30-foot 3, and it was no good. The Davidson Wildcats would not become the 3rd double-digit seed to make a Final Four, and instead, the clock would strike midnight and Davidson's Cinderella run would officially be over. As for the Jayhawks, they would then go on to beat #1 overall seed North Carolina in the Final Four by 18, and then play a marvelous national championship versus Derrick Rose and the Memphis Tigers, defeating them by 7 in overtime. And that is the story of Stephen Curry and the magical run of the 2008 Davidson Wildcats. Steph would end up coming back for one more college season and lead the nation in scoring, but the team around him just wasn't the same. They ended up getting bounced in their conference tournament and making the NIT, and as great as an individual season it was for Steph, it wasn't the same as the 2008 team. In the midst of this run, I don't think anybody ever could have imagined the type of impact that Steph Curry would have on the NBA. Even after getting drafted in 2009, 7th overall, there were plenty of analysts that questioned if he had the frame to be able to play in the NBA. And that's what makes this run even more special to me, is to know what Stephen Curry would become in the 2010s and the 2020s, winning multiple MVPs, multiple NBA finals, and becoming one of the greatest point guards and basketball players of all time. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoy videos like these, check out the video I just made. It's right here. And as always, we'll see you on the hardwood.